So today we're going to take a closer look at the animal kingdom. We're going to be looking at vertebrates today. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to differentiate between the groups of vertebrates. Again, this is we're looking at just the animal kingdom this time. We previously looked at invertebrates. We're going to be looking at vertebrates particularly. Now, vertebrates are from a group known as the chordates. What makes something a chordate is having a notochord, a nerve cord, and pharyngeal slit pouches or slits. The notochord is a flexible rod that extends the length of a developing organism. In some cases, the chordate keeps the notochord. In some cases, the notochord is only in early development before they form something like a vertebral column, like the vertebrates. There are also slit-like openings in the early chordates called the pharyngeal slits that are between the body cavity and the outside of the body. And then there's also a nerve cord. Part of the nerve cord will usually become the organism's brain. So as I said, we've previously looked at the invertebrate section. We're looking at the chordate section, but particularly the vertebrate section, which we're going to be looking at jawless fish, cartilaginous fish, bony fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. One thing to know about vertebrates is they can fall into two categories in terms of body temperature. They can either be ectotherms, which are cold-blooded animals. It means they need to depend on the outside environment for their body temperature changes. They do not control their body temperature. Organisms that fall into this category would be amphibians like frogs, lizards, crocodiles, snakes, turtles, most fish, well, all fish actually. Then we also have endotherms, which are warm-blooded animals. Now, the endotherms are able to generate heat on their own, and they do control their own body temperature. This includes elephants, dogs, whales, cats, eagles, and us, humans. For example, our body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees. That's an average temperature. It does not mean everybody's falls at that temperature. Usually, our body temperatures naturally range within a degree of that. So some people could have a body temperature around 97.6, some could be up around 99. First, we're going to look at the largest group of vertebrates, and that's the fish. Fish fall into three smaller groups: jawless fish, which are agnathans, jawed cartilaginous fish, which are chondrichthyans, and bony fish, which are called the ichthyes. I'm just going to use the general name. So jawless fish are flexible and they do not have a jaw. They do not have a traditional skeleton. Jawed cartilaginous fish are a little bit more developed. They have a cartilage skeleton, which is very flexible. You find cartilage in your joints, your nose, your ears. And then there are the bony fish, which have a traditional endoskeleton and an internal one. They're all ectotherms. They do not have control over their body temperature. The environment is a judge of where their body temperature will fall. They can exist in environments ranging from a desert pond to sub-freezing Arctic waters of the Arctic Ocean. They breathe through gills. The water helps keep the gills open and inflated. Blood vessels run through the gills, and the blood either releases carbon dioxide into the water or is there to help pick up oxygen from the water, which will move into the blood vessels. Fish also have different fins for different functions. The fins on the side, such as the pectoral ones here, are used to help the fish steer themselves through the water. The fins at the top, such as the pelvic fin and the dorsal fins, are there to help keep the fish stabilized as it swims through the water. They have wet scales, kind of like the shingles on the house. It covers their skin for protection. They lay eggs in the water. The eggs are fertilized externally within the water. They lay a lot of eggs because laying eggs externally can be dangerous, and many of those eggs do not survive to be hatched, and due to predators or just through elements of the environment killing off the eggs and the developing embryos before they mature. They do spend their whole lives in water. Next, we're going to look at the amphibians. Amphibians are special because they spend part of their life in the water and part of their life on land. This includes frogs, toads, newts, salamanders. The word amphibian comes from the Greek word amphibios, which means double life, because of that ability to spend part of their life in water and part on land. They don't have scales like fish do. They have very moist skin, and when they lay their eggs, the eggs are jelly coated to help keep them moist and protected. Amphibians have a strong endoskeleton. As I said, an endoskeleton is an internal skeleton. It helps provide structure for their bodies and help them complete different parts of their life that help them catch food, for example. So toads and frogs have strong hind legs for swimming and jumping. Adult amphibians also have lungs for gas exchange. Now, the lungs are not the most efficient because in their heart they have a three-chambered heart where oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood will mix in the third chamber to help them get more oxygen. Their skin is wet and moist, which allows gas exchange through the skin itself. Again, another very different thing about amphibians. Their skin must be kept moist so that could happen. They also relatively have large eyes, which are good for helping them catch prey. Amphibians go through metamorphosis. Metamorphosis doesn't just occur in arthropods like insects. They start off usually, in the case of frogs, as the egg frogs, and you have the tadpole stage that spends its time in the water. Over time, legs begin to form and the lungs begin to form and develop as well. And eventually, the developing frog is able to spend more and more of its time on land until it becomes the mature version of itself. Now, this isn't just for frogs, it's for all amphibians. This is a much more detailed look at how the amphibian is able to fully mature over time. We also have reptiles, which are called reptilia. They have scaly skin, however their skin is very dry. They don't depend on water for reproduction like the amphibians and fish do. They can live their life entirely on lands, however there are some amphibians that do reptiles that spend their time in water. And just like the amphibians and the fish, they are also cold-blooded. This phylum also includes turtles, alligators, crocodiles, lizards, and snakes. Turtles have a very hard shell, as you already know. They eat insects, worms, fish, and plants. Alligators and crocodiles, like turtles, spend some of their time in water. They live near water, and they are predators of many of the aquatic organisms. Remember, alligators have a shorter snout, crocodiles have a longer one. And then we have lizards and snakes. These are the largest group of reptiles. Both have an organ on the top of their mouth that helps them sense molecules collected by the tongue. They have an in and out motion of their tongue that helps them smell their surroundings. It's very sensitive to that. Lizards, however, have movable eyelids, external ears, and legs with clawed toes. Snakes have no eyelids or ears or legs. Instead, they use vibrations they feel in the ground to help them sense the environment and whether they are in danger or not. Some adaptations, just like the amphibians, they have lungs for gas exchange. Even those who spend a long time in water have the lungs, and they are very well developed. What's very different about them is they lay something called an amniotic egg. Now, the amniotic egg allows them to for fertilization and development to occur on land. There's a very thick covering on the egg to help protect the embryo. there's a yolk that provides food for the embryo as it develops, and the environment inside the egg is kept moist for the developing embryo. Many times the reptiles lay the eggs and then lay on them for warmth, and then they hatch when the embryo is fully developed into the young version of the animal that is developing them. Some snakes are able to keep the eggs internal and allow hatching to occur internally as well. Birds, also known as aves, so they, just like the reptiles, are able to lay an egg and sit on them to keep them warm until they hatch. Next to fish, they are the next most numerous group of vertebrates. There are 8,600 known species. However, these are warm-blooded. They are endothermic. Their environment has no control over their body temperature. It stays pretty stable. They have 2 wings, 2 legs, and a beak or bill. The beak or bill usually gives clues about their environment. Some birds are able to fly, some are less able. We know that ostriches are not able to fly. They, however, have strong legs for good running skills. Penguins that are not able to run are actually good swimmers and have a very streamlined body for the water. Some are excellent at scooping up food like fish. So in the case of a pelican, they have very large beaks to scoop up fish for food. And some are also play the role of being food for humans and other mammals. We also have owls that keep rodent populations reduced. They are very good predators when they fly and look for their food. Barn swallows have small beaks that are good for picking up insects, and hummingbirds are very excellent at picking up nectar from flowers that have a very long body to them. In the meantime, they usually pick up pollen, are very good at pollinating plants. Birds also are very well adapted for flight. They have a very streamlined body, which helps them fly through the air with very little wind resistance. Their skeletons are very hollow, which allows them a lot of uplift when they do take off, and less weight. They also have crisscrossing structures in those bones that are there for strength, even though the bones are mainly hollow. The tail vertebrae are joined and fused together to help keep the tail rigid during flight. This is very important so that there is structure so that the tail helps guide them through the air. Birds without tails or with shorter tails have a shorter flight time. The feathers are also there to help them steer through the air, so there are contour feathers which are streamlined in shape and help them with steering and camouflaging and attracting mates. There are also down feathers which help them stay warm and help them insulate. Birds, as you've probably seen before, like to preen and clean and reorganize their feathers. The reorganizing of the feathers is what helps them continue to have flight. Preening spreads oil to keep the feathers from getting brittle and also helps keep their skin soft. Now we're going to go into the last group, mammals, mammalia. There are about 4,000 species of mammals on Earth. They exist on every continent on Earth and in all different types of climates, from Arctic regions to desert regions. Some are aquatic, and that includes platypus, duck-billed platypuses, whales, and dolphins. Some are able to fly like bats, some burrow into the ground like rabbits and prairie dogs, and some help with flower pollination like bats, or they help with seed dispersal. They are warm-blooded, meaning they're endotherms. They usually have skin covered in hair that helps insulate their body from cold and heat. Some hair and some of them is patchier than others. Hair can also protect the mammals from wind and water. Other mammals have little to no hair, like whales and dolphins. Whales and dolphins usually only have it when they're in their youngest stages. Wool, spines, quills, and some horns are modified versions of hair. Females have mammary glands for feeding their young, and they give birth to live offspring.